When you let go, it creates the space for something new to emerge in your life. It creates the space for something new to come in. And letting go is very counterintuitive. And I want to share how that really works in this video. So counterintuitive, what this really means is that it runs opposing to what we ordinarily think. It's the exact opposite of what we conventionally believe something to be. And letting go in a lot of contexts ends up being very counterintuitive, where we think that it would be the weak move or the wrong move. It ends up being the right move. It ends up being the wise and powerful thing to actually do. It ends up bringing more desired results for us. So in this video, I want to teach you about some of these very counterintuitive sort of principles and ideas so that you can kind of apply them to your life in ways that actually help your overall fulfillment, your satisfaction, and well-being. So let's talk about power. How do we conventionally think of power within our society? We think of dominance and force and essentially something overpowering some kind of like weaker force. But when we really look at what's going on there, this comes from ego, fear, resistance, unnecessary tension, inner conflict, sickness, essentially. It actually comes from weakness. And true power is being able to let go. In a lot of cases, it's being able to surrender oneself to life. That ends up being far harder than always pushing, forcing, dominating, etc. And of course, there's a time to be assertive, right? This doesn't mean that you just be passive forever. But in a lot of contexts, the wise move is to actually just learn to totally let go. So let's zoom in on this just a little bit more. Real power is not force, but a conscious movement through life, balancing action and non-action, being and doing, giving and receiving, holding on as in maintaining something, not like a clinging, and letting go. So this is a pretty different way of thinking about actual power. This is a non-attachment to the point where you aren't afraid to get attached. It goes totally full circle. So ordinarily when we think of power, again, it's really thought of as in like, I have a sword and I can like cut your head off and I'm just way stronger than you. When how this really begins to play out in the actual world is the person who's able to be the most detached, they're able to let go the most, often has a lot of power. Look at this in relationships. Look at this in business deals. When someone is very sort of needy for some kind of business deal, of course, that person is very easily manipulated. When someone is very desperate for some kind of position of power, they're easily manipulated. They're easily controlled. When someone's desperate for something in a relationship, again, they can be easily manipulated, easily controlled. And that whole position is coming from ego, fear, basically weakness, like actual weakness, not power. And the person's ability to just remain grounded, open, and just surrender, not always be fighting against life, this is a far more powerful position to actually embody. So it ends up being very counterintuitive, totally not what we really thought it was. How about attraction? There's attraction in letting go and just essentially letting go of outcomes, really. There's a lot of attraction in allowing yourself to just naturally be as you actually are. And when you're unable to let go, when you're holding on, there's a lot of repulsion. There's actually a sense of clinginess, attachment to outcomes, wanting something, manipulating, and people can just like instinctually detect that. So it ends up being weakness. It ends up pushing things away. It ends up being inauthentic. It ends up not being true to you as a person, your values, your current state, etc., your personality. It ends up being a position of weakness once again, whereas letting go, allowing yourself to be as you are, ends up being more radiant, more energizing, more attractive. Of course, you're going to repel people who don't resonate with you, but you're going to attract people who really, really do. And you have, of course, the overall confidence and inner power to really allow yourself to shine. So moving on, there's a relief in letting go. Typically, when we think of trying to like find relief, it means clinging on to pleasure, essentially. There's a massive aspect of just grasping for more. So there's a relief in letting go and suffering in grasping for more. Humans tend to grasp onto pleasure, right? And essentially just avoid pain. The grasping and avoiding itself is 95% of the suffering that that we experience. The very cause of it is that we're fundamentally at war with experience, grasping onto things, needing to push other things away. So when you're able to just like stop this game and just let it go, again, you actually find relief. When you allow yourself to feel whatever arises, to be fully transparent within yourself about whatever arises, you actually find yourself in a more powerful position, a more grounded position, a more in control position. So there's relief in letting go and suffering in always grasping on for more pleasure or avoiding pain. There's relief in just allowing all this stuff to move in a very organic and natural way. And there's essentially just a complete waste of energy in trying to always control it. Speaking of control, how about control as being very counterintuitive? In a lot of cases, when you let go of control, rather than always being so controlling in your relationships, whether it's intimate or with a child or anything, right? In your business, in your career, rather than always trying to be so controlling, it comes across as neurotic, it comes across as weak. Once again, it comes across as unstable, ungrounded. Being able to let go, again, in a lot of contexts, ends up bringing more power, ends up bringing more stability, groundedness, etc. It's more attractive. People feel it off of you, right? Subconsciously, they just detect it. So there's joy in letting life move, flow, and dance, and suffering in trying to make the impermanent permanent. So even the good things in life, they become the very source of suffering when you always want to cling on to them, when you want to hold on to them. How about letting go of things that give you pleasure when it's time to let go of them? Very counterintuitive. You'd think that like this thing that I find pleasure in, whether it's like this relationship or this whatever it is, this feeling in my body, right, trying to hold on to it and make it permanent, ends up being a massive cause of suffering. So something that once brought you happiness, then it began to flip around and it started to create suffering. So again, very counterintuitive stuff. It's just very kind of like twisted, where it kind of like begins to warp your mind a little bit. So again, there's joy in letting life move, flow, and dance, and suffering in trying to make the impermanent permanent. So when things make you feel happy, how about letting them go? Right? When it's time, of course, right? You got to get that idea that there's an actual rhythm and a flow to it, and that everything is going to come and go. And if you're holding on to something that you once found joy in, when it's time for it to go, of course, there you go. That's the very problem that I'm pointing to here. It's that itself is going to cause suffering. So there's relaxation in letting go. And I'm talking about real relaxation, not escapism, which most of what we conventionally think of relaxation is just escapism. Watching movies, video games, eating junk food, scrolling on our phones, sitting on the couch, doing absolutely nothing. Of course, all this stuff begins to numb us, right? What we conventionally think of as relaxation is just numbing. It's a way to escape our current state. So moving on from that, there's relaxation in letting go and unnecessary tension in holding on. The body starts to release its tension and holding patterns. So when you're really opening up to the moment, really just allowing it to totally be as it is, your body naturally starts to like decompress a lot of the tension that it habitually stores. You actually start to feel more rejuvenated. You actually start to feel more energized because it takes a lot of energy to always be tense and guarded and fighting the present experience. It's actually you burning your own energy. It's like a mismanagement of your own energy. So when you're able to let go, you can actually be more relaxed. It just kind of comes naturally. That's it for this video. If you're interested in working one-to-one with me, you can apply to do so. Link is in the pinned comment. Take it easy.